Friends, Namaskar. This is Jitu from Odisha Journeys. Welcome to yet another episode of Odisha Journeys. Friends, when we take our travelers to South Odisha, Gajapati and Koraput to the highlands of Odisha for an immersive experience, we make a stopover at a place called Potagada, which is about 2 to 2.5 hour drive from Bhubaneswar and not very far from the national highway which we take during the travel. So, it is just within 2 kilometers. So, Potagada is a star-shaped fort which is an architectural wonder, which is an archaeological wonder from the 18th century. It is one of its kind of the European forts in the whole of Odisha. Friends, in the 18th century, when Europe was going through, the surge of industrial revolutions, so it was the British who took the lead, and it was then followed by the British and then the Dutch and the Portuguese, and within a very short period Europe emerged as a major sophisticated urban center. So there were several cities flourishing with aristocratic life in Europe, and there was a need of resources because to support to the burgeoning urban communities there was a extensive need of resources, and over a period of time the resources were exhausted within Europe. So they had to look for alternative resources, and then India was a major option for them. The whole of Indian subcontinent and also Southeast Asia was a major option for the Europeans. The British came, followed by the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and India over a period of just 50 to 100 years became colonies of these European powers, and initially their only interest was trade and also to acquire the resources. So they had to tie up with the local kings, the local maharajas, and then the local feudal lords to acquire resources. Friends, during 18th century, Odisha was a major seafaring culture. Odisha, there were several ports existing along the Odisha coast, and Odias, like the merchants which were referred to as Sadhavas, they were having extensive trade connections with Southeast Asia. So we have reports that out of 10 Chinese coming to Odisha, 9 of them were settling down. So we have several art historic evidence from 13th century which talk about Odisha's connections with Southeast Asia. We have also archaeological remains like Chinese pottery, porcelain celadons, and also pottery from Persian Gulf, Arab world. So we have found during our excavations along the Odisha coast. So Odisha was a very peaceful state which was accommodative, and there was a high culture. When the Europeans came, the scene changed. So first they made a base in Madras, the Europeans, French and the British, and then they moved towards northern part of Bay of Bengal, that is Balasore in Odisha, and then finally on the bank of Hooghly river, now which you have the Calcutta, the city of Kolkata. So during this period, there used to be 18th century, in the middle of the 18th century, there used to be conflicts between these emerging European powers who had established their colonies in the east coast of India, like Portuguese, Dutch, and British and the French. When we look at the Indian history during the 18th and 19th century, you have the Battle of Plassey, which was fought in 1757, and that was where the French were defeated finally. And then you have the Battle of Buxar in Bihar. So, and then you have a series of Karnataki wars where the French and the local rulers were also defeated by the British. And then the British started gaining their monopolies. So during this period in Ganjam district of Odisha, which is the southernmost part of Odisha, Potagada, where we are, where we are exploring today, Potagada was under the control of the Qutub Shahis of Golcondas. So Qutub Shahis were a major, it was an empire. They had their roots in the Middle East, and then they had made after the fall of Bahmanis in Bijapur, they had evolved, they had emerged as the ruling power in Golconda. And this part of Odisha, the southern part of Odisha, which was their northernmost limit, it was known as Northern Chikakol. So where they had their colonies. So when we visit Potagad, we find a couple of buildings and also a mosque belonging to the Qutub Shahis. And then the French came, and because they were even before the British, and so they had also their controls. We have a few their grave tombs, which is at the site of Potagad, which gives an idea about the control of French even over the fort of Potagad. So 18th century, in the middle of the 18th century, when there was rivalism happening between these European powers, so the British understood the need of a strategic fort where they would be able to control their monopoly, as well as also they would be able to fight the other European powers who were also competing with them. So that is how Potagad was selected on the estuary of Rusikulya river. Rusikulya is one of the major rivers in Odisha, in southern part of Odisha, and it was also navigable throughout the history of Odisha. Here you have Samapa, the edict of Asoka, and also it was a vibrant city in the 3rd century BC. So it was a very well-known land. It was a very well-known river in this part of Odisha, in the southern part of Odisha. And it was also an agrarian region. There were a lot of farming activities happening. Rice was one of the major crops, and Ganjam has been known throughout its history for its rice, the best varieties of rice, and also the textiles. So Berhampur, the nearby city, was known as the silk city of Odisha, and there were several clusters of weaving communities here in this part of Odisha. So this part of Odisha had been both economically as well as also culturally very vibrant. Potagada is a star-shaped fort on the estuary of Rusikulya river, and it is an archaeological wonder built in the 18th century. Friends, Pota means frigate and Gada means fort. So it was a fort for the gunships, and it was developed during the 18th century. Friends, so when we take our guests to Potagad, we take them around this star-shaped fort. Star-shaped fort is an idea which is not there in Indian history. So it was an European concept which they had introduced. You might be knowing about the forts located in Karnataka, especially during the era of Tipu's rule, and also after that. So there were several star-shaped forts in Karnataka, but here in Odisha we have the only of its kind, that is Potagad, which is made out of burnt bricks and surrounded by a moat. And on the other side you have the Rusikulya, which is a natural barrier, and not very far from this Potagad fort, just 1 kilometer from here, 1 or 2 kilometers maximum, you have the Bay of Bengal. And when you are traveling inside the Potagad fort, when you are visiting that sites, you have several structures, and many of these structures were used actually to store the gunpowder and other weaponaries. There were secret passages, and these are all made in the architectural style of Europe's defense, Europe's military architectures. So these are also there inside, and then this gives you an idea about how Odisha was also under the British rule, and there were military architecture existing in Odisha coast, which is hardly talked about, because when we think about Odisha, it is not just the temples of Bhubaneswar, Puri and Konark. It has got several other historical wonders such as Potagad. Friends, when you visit Potagad, there is also a graveyard, where you have the spire shaped structures of several graves most of them were the British, and they all belong to the 18th and the 19th centuries. And this is supposed to be one of the largest graveyards in the whole of Odisha of the colonial, of the British. And here you have the gravestones of the British soldiers and the officers who had lost their lives when they fought the wars against the rulers of the Ghumsars and also the Khemundi, because they were trying, these local political powers, the the Gadajat powers, what we say in Odisha. So they had revolted against the British monopoly, and there were several wars in Ganjam where the British had lost their lives. Many of the British officers had lost their lives, and they were buried here. And you have such beautiful structures built over their graves. So that is also yet another attractions when you are visiting Potagad. So friends, so Odisha, as I said, it is not just confined to the temples for which it is widely known, such as the temples of Bhubaneswar or Konark or Puri. It has got several other archaeological sites such as Potagad, which are mind-blowing experiences when you go there and immerse yourself to understand how Odisha had played its role in the history of India. So a place like Potagad gives you lot of informations, lot of understanding about Odisha's history. So they stand as mute testimonies to Odisha's past. So friends, when you are planning for a visit to Odisha and Potagad, which is a day trip event, which could be arranged as a day trip from Bhubaneswar, think about Odisha journeys, and we conduct such tours for our travelers and make a stopover, as I said, at Potagad, and where the travelers go through a very immersive experience. Thank you so much. Namaskar.